A bank bought 5,000 hectares from a struggling farmer for almost nothing. They laughed when his son tried to warn them. But one man kept a single folded paper in his coat pocket for 23 years, and in 1972, that paper stopped everything. Reginald Folsom picked up the phone at 6:47 in the morning and heard his lawyer say 4 words he had never heard before. The bulldozers cannot move. Folsom was the president of Continental Agrarian Bank. He had broken ground on 11 projects. He had never once had a lawyer call before breakfast. He told Crane to say it again. Crane said it again. There was an easement, 12 feet wide, registered in 1941. Running straight through the center of the processing corridor that Continental had spent 4 years and 2 million pesos planning. The easement had never been cancelled. It had never been bought. It had never been transferred to Continental when the bank purchased the land in 1949. It still belonged to someone else. Folsom asked who. Crane said the name slowly, as if he could not believe it himself. Crispin Maliwat. Folsom set down his coffee cup. He had not thought about that name in 20 years. Rewind to September 3, 1949. The auction was held inside a converted grain storage barn in Pinamalayan. 4 folding tables were pushed together at the front. A dented coffee pot sat on a crate near the door. 12 men stood in the room. Most of them were there to watch. Only 2 were there to bid. One of them was Reginald Folsom, 20 years old, representing Continental Agrarian's Acquisitions Division. He wore a pressed white barong and carried a leather notebook. He had already decided what the land was worth. He had already decided what he would pay. He wrote the number down before the auctioneer said a word. The other bidder was Crispin Maliwat. Crispin was 38. He was the son of the man who had farmed that valley for 31 years before illness and debt had taken everything. He wore a plain shirt. He had no notebook. He stood near the back wall with his hands at his sides. The bidding lasted 11 minutes. Continental's number was P47000, just under P9 per hectare. Crispin raised his hand twice. The first time, he offered P44000. The second time, P46,500. He had no more after that. Everyone in the room knew it. When the gavel came down, Folsom wrote a single underlined figure in his notebook and turned to the man beside him and said something low. Both men laughed. It was not a cruel laugh. It was the easy laugh of men watching something they had already predicted. The widow's boy had tried. The bank had won. That was all. Crispin did not look at either of them. He walked to the front table and paid a fee of P2. It was a registration fee for filing a formal observation on the transaction record. The auctioneer barely looked up. A clerk stamped a small receipt and slid it across the table without speaking. Crispin folded the receipt once. Then again. He put it in the breast pocket of his coat. He walked out of the barn without speaking to anyone. Folsom watched him go. He noticed only that the man paused near the barn's side window on the way out and looked through the dirty glass at the ridge across the road. The ridge his father had planted corn against for 3 decades. Then Crispin kept walking. Folsom turned back to his notes. He had 3 more properties to evaluate before noon. That evening, Crispin sat alone at the kitchen table in the small house he had rented since his father's illness began. Rosario, his wife, set a plate in front of him and then sat across the table and waited. She had learned over 14 years of marriage that Crispin would speak when he was ready and not before. He ate slowly. He said, "I paid the observation fee." She said, "I know." He said nothing else for a while. The lamp between them made a small circle of yellow light on the table. Outside, the night was quiet. There were no trucks, no machinery. The valley was still. Crispin reached into his coat pocket and set the folded receipt on the table between them. It was small, barely 3 inches across when folded. The ink was already fading on the corner where the clerk's stamp had pressed too hard. Rosario looked at it. She did not pick it up. She did not ask what it meant. She already knew her husband well enough to know that a man who pays P2 for a piece of paper at a lost auction does not do it without a reason. She cleared the plates. She went to bed. Crispin remained at the table. He picked up the receipt and unfolded it once. He read the single line of text printed across the top. He folded it again. He put it back in his coat pocket. He sat for a long time in the yellow light. He knew something. He had known it since February, when he had spent 6 weeks reading files in the provincial library that no one else had opened in years. He knew something about 12 feet of land that ran straight through the center of everything Continental Agrarian had just paid P47,000 to own. He had not told anyone. He would not tell anyone. He simply needed to wait for the bank to need it. Before this gets bigger than anyone expected, hit subscribe. Because what Crispin found in that library is the kind of detail that only one person in that entire valley ever bothered to look for. February 1950. The east wing of the Bulacan Provincial Library. A gray metal cabinet. File drawer 7. Crispin pulled the drawer open on a Tuesday morning and the metal groaned like it had not moved in years. It probably had not. Aling Petra, the librarian, looked up from her desk. She had seen Crispin every Tuesday for 5 months. He arrived when she unlocked the front door. He left when she turned off the lights. He brought lunch in a cloth bag and ate at the reading table without making a sound. He never explained what he was looking for. He did not need to. Aling Petra was a librarian. She understood that some questions take longer than one visit. Crispin had started with the oldest files. The 1901 Colonial Land Survey. The 1923 Subdivision Records. The 1931 Irrigation District Charter. He moved forward year by year, folder by folder, reading documents that had not been touched since they were filed. Most of what he found was ordinary. Then he found the 1941 road expansion records. The folder was thin. 6 pages. Typed on government letterhead and stamped with a seal from the Bureau of Public Works. The proposal was for a 12-foot service access road running north to south along the central parcel of what was then Maliwat family land. The road had been surveyed in June 1941. Stakes had been driven. A formal government easement had been registered with the county clerk. Then the war came. In 1943, with the Japanese occupation moving through the valley, the Bureau of Public Works quietly filed the project under deferred, wartime suspension. The survey stakes were pulled in 1944. The road was never built. But the easement was never cancelled. The paperwork to dissolve it had never been filed. No legislative action had been taken. No court order had been issued. Under provincial property law, a registered easement did not disappear when the project was shelved. It stayed on the books until someone formally removed it. No one had. The easement was still registered. The county had sold the Maliwat land to Continental Agrarian Bank in 1949 without mentioning it. Continental had bought 5,000 hectares and had no idea that a 12-foot strip running through the center of their property still legally belonged to the government's road project, and because the road project had been formally observed and contested by Crispin at the 1949 auction, his P2 registration fee had created a procedural link between his family's objection and the unresolved easement. He had not known that in September. He knew it now. Crispin sat in the east wing for a long time. He did not write anything yet. He read the 6 pages twice. Then a third time. Then he closed the folder and put it back in file drawer 7 and pushed the drawer shut. He walked home. The kettle was already on when he came through the door. Rosario looked at his face and said nothing. She poured 2 cups and set them on the kitchen table. Crispin opened the small brown notebook she had given him for his birthday 3 years earlier. He had not written in it yet. He uncapped his pen. He drew the valley from memory. The ridge. The road. The parcel boundaries. The creek on the eastern edge. He drew it the way a man draws a place he has known since childhood, without needing to measure anything. Then he drew a straight line down the center of Continental's land. 12 feet wide. North to south. Rosario watched him draw. She asked, "Is it enough?" He said, "If they ever build, yes." She looked at the line on the page. She nodded once. She picked up her cup. Over the next 8 months, Crispin watched. Continental was not building yet. But they were moving. Survey flags appeared along the eastern edge of the valley in March 1950. Then truck tracks in the mud near the northern boundary. Then, in July, 2 men in hard hats walked the ridge with a transit scope and wrote things on clipboards. Crispin noted each date in the notebook. He wrote in small, plain letters. No flourishes. Just dates, observations, and numbers. July 14th. 2 surveyors, Northern Ridge, measuring towards central parcel. August 2nd. New LLC filing at County Clerk, Agrarian Holdings Group. Same address as Continental. August 19th. Survey flags moved 30 meters south. New line consistent with corridor planning. He tracked the LLC purchases through public filings at the clerk's office. Continental was quietly assembling parcels on both sides of the valley, buying up adjacent plots through shell companies, preparing for something large. He counted 280 acres of new acquisitions by October 1950. Every single one of them relied on access through the central parcel. Every single one of them, to function as a connected corridor, required crossing that 12-foot strip. The strip that was still, on the books, encumbered by a government easement registered in 1941 and never dissolved. Crispin did not contact a lawyer. He did not file anything. He did not call the county. He paid the annual tax bill on his remaining adjacent parcel, P38, the same week it arrived every spring. He kept the notebook in the kitchen drawer. He let Continental keep buying. The more they bought, the more the 12 feet mattered. Every new parcel they added made the corridor wider, longer, more expensive. Every peso they spent assembling the project was a peso that made the strip impossible to route around. There was no alternate route. The creek blocked the east. The ridge blocked the west. A 12-foot easement through the center was not an inconvenience. It was the only door. And only one man had the key. In October 1950, Crispin sat at the kitchen table one final time with the hand-drawn map in front of him. He looked at the line. He looked at the 280 acres of new purchases surrounding it. He closed the notebook. 400,000 pesos. The man on the front porch said it like the number would end the conversation before it started. His name was Arnel Santos. He was young, early 30s, pressed slacks, a clipboard under his arm, the kind of smile that had been trained rather than earned. He said he represented a development group with significant interests in the valley. He said the number again, more slowly, in case Crispin had not heard. Crispin had heard. He said, "No thank you." Santos blinked. He had driven 3 hours to deliver that number. He had expected questions. He had not expected 2 words and a screen door swinging shut. He stood on the porch for a moment. Then he walked back to his car. That was 1955. Crispin paid his P38 tax bill that spring, the same as every spring. He mowed the 12-foot strip twice, once in April, once in September, with the same push mower his father had left him. He kept the corner markers clear. He noted Santos's visit in the notebook on the line below the date, with the offer amount and the 2 words he had said in reply. The notebook was filling slowly. Rosario asked once, after Santos left, whether it would always be that easy. Crispin thought about it. He said, "The next one won't be as polite." She folded a dish towel over the oven handle. She said nothing. She had already decided years ago that if her husband had spent 6 weeks reading water-damaged county files in a library, she was not going to question his math. The second offer came by phone in 1961. It was not Santos. It was a man named Vicente Ramos, who identified himself as a senior liaison from the Bulacan Provincial Planning Office. His voice was formal, careful. He said the county had been in conversation with Continental Agrarian about a potential agricultural development zone designation for the valley. He said the designation would raise assessed values across all parcels. He said it would be in the Maliwat family's interest to reach a cooperative arrangement before the official zoning review. Crispin asked what cooperative meant. Ramos said it meant selling before the paperwork complicated things. Crispin was quiet for a moment. Then he thanked Vicente Ramos. He declined. He wrote in the notebook, October 3, 1961. Phone. County liaison. 680,000, zoning pressure used. Declined. Below the entry, he drew a small horizontal line. He turned the page. Their daughter Elena was 12 in 1961. She had her mother's stillness and her father's habit of watching things longer than necessary before speaking. One afternoon that year, she walked out to where Crispin was mowing the strip and stood at the edge of the grass and watched him finish the row. She asked, "Why do you always mow here and not out there?" He turned off the mower. He wiped his hands. He said, "Because out there is theirs. This part is ours." She looked at the strip. She looked at the rest of the valley beyond the markers. She nodded and went back inside. Crispin watched her go. He did not think about that moment again for 11 years. Continental Agrarian's boardroom, sometime in 1965. Reginald Folsom had a map on the wall. It showed the valley in green, with the parcels Continental owned shaded in blue. The blue covered almost everything. Almost. A thin white line ran through the center. Folsom's project manager had circled it in red marker. It was 12 feet wide. It ran north to south. Every single logistics road in the corridor plan crossed it. There was no engineering solution. There was no alternate alignment. The creek and the ridge made certain of that. Folsom told the room to make the number work. The room nodded. His lawyer, a man named Whitfield Crane, made a note in his legal pad and said nothing. The third offer arrived on a Thursday morning in 1967. Crane himself came. He drove out in a silver sedan. He wore a three-piece suit. He carried a leather briefcase. He knocked twice and waited. Rosario answered the door. She looked at the briefcase, then at Crane, then at the suit. She let him in without a word. She poured coffee without being asked. She set the cups on the kitchen table and sat beside Crispin. Crane opened the briefcase. He laid a document on the table. The number on the first line was 1.4 million pesos. He walked through the terms. He had clearly done this before. He kept his voice even. He said the agreement was fair. He said it was generous. He said Continental had a construction timeline that required resolution before the end of the fiscal year. He pushed the document across the table. Crispin looked at it. He did not pick it up. He said, "Tell Mr. Folsom I appreciate the visit." Crane said, "This is the final offer?" Crispin said, "I understand." He stood up. He carried his coffee cup to the counter. He rinsed it. Crane sat for a moment at the kitchen table with a 1.4 million peso document and two empty chairs in front of him. Then he put the document back in his briefcase. He thanked Rosario for the coffee. He left. Rosario watched his car until it turned off the road. She said, "He'll be back." Crispin said, "Yes." She said, "When?" He said, "When they have no choice." Continental broke ground on a separate phase of the project in 1969. It covered everything they could access without crossing the strip. It was not what they had planned. It was a quarter of what the corridor required. After 2 years of construction on that reduced footprint, the numbers told Folsom what Crispin had known since 1950. There was no project without the 12 feet. On a Tuesday morning in March 1972, Crane filed the groundbreaking permits for the full corridor. They were approved on a Friday. On Saturday, someone at the county clerk's office finally opened file drawer 7. Crane got the call on Monday. He called Folsom. Folsom called the number he had kept in a desk drawer since 1967 and told himself he would never need. The phone on Crispin's kitchen counter rang at 8:14 in the morning. Crispin looked at it. He dried his hands on a dish towel. He picked it up. Whitfield Crane's voice came through the line flat and careful, the way a man speaks when he has been told to say something he does not believe. He said, "Mr. Maliwat, Continental is prepared to offer 2 million pesos for full title transfer of the strip." Crispin said no. Crane said 2.4. Crispin said no. Crane said, "Mr. Maliwat, the groundbreaking is in 4 days. We need resolution before then." Crispin said, "I know. I'll call you back." He hung up. Elena arrived on Saturday morning in a white sedan she had bought herself with her first salary from the firm. She was 33. She had passed the bar 4 years earlier and worked property law in Manila. She had not known, until the previous Tuesday night when her father called, exactly what she had been the daughter of all these years. She sat at the kitchen table across from Crispin. Between them, the original filing from the 1941 road expansion. The county's 1943 wartime deferral memo. Crispin's notebook. A manila envelope containing 22 consecutive annual tax receipts, P38 each, paid every spring without a single gap. Elena read everything in silence. She read for 40 minutes. Then she looked up and asked one question. She said, "They never filed the dissolution?" Crispin said no. She looked at the stack of papers. She looked at her father's hands on the table. She thought about a 12-year-old girl standing at the edge of a mode strip asking why. She picked up her pen. Elena called Crane on Monday morning. She identified herself as Elena Maliwat, attorney, representing the Maliwat family in the matter of the registered 1941 easement crossing Continental Agrarian's planned processing corridor. She said the family was not interested in a sale. She said the family was prepared to proceed to a formal easement hearing before the Provincial Land Authority if Continental preferred that route. Crane said Continental would challenge the easement on grounds of abandonment. Elena said, "On what evidence?" Crane was quiet for a moment. Elena said, "We have 22 years of annual tax payments, receipts numbered and dated, on a parcel the county assessed and collected on every single year. The county cannot simultaneously collect taxes on a parcel and later claim it was abandoned. Your challenge will not survive the first document." Crane said he would need to consult with Mr. Folsom. Elena said, "I'll give you until Wednesday." She hung up. Continental filed the abandonment challenge anyway on Tuesday. The hearing was held Thursday morning in a small room at the Provincial Land Authority office. 3 chairs on one side of the table. 3 on the other. Elena placed 3 documents on the table in front of the hearing officer. The 1941 registered easement. The 1943 wartime deferral stamp, which she noted was a suspension, not a cancellation, and carried no legal extinguishing effect. 22 years of tax receipts, rubber-banded in chronological order, beginning with the P38 bill paid in the spring of 1950 and ending with the P38 bill paid 6 weeks ago. She said the county taxed this parcel every year for 22 consecutive years. They accepted payment every year. A property that is taxed and maintained is not abandoned. It is held. Then she reached into the manila envelope and placed one more item on the table. The folded receipt from September 3, 1949. The P2 registration fee. The formal observation notation. The procedural link between Crispin's filing at the 1949 auction and the unresolved easement that Continental had purchased the land without clearing. She said this is the document that ties the easement to the Maliwat family standing. It was filed before the sale completed. The bank had constructive notice. They proceeded anyway. The hearing officer read the 4 documents. He ruled in 11 minutes. Continental's abandonment challenge was denied. The easement stood. Crane reached for his phone before he had left his chair. Folsom called Elena directly on Friday. He did not send a lawyer. He said, "What do you want?" Elena had already written the terms on a single page. A permanent registered easement, held in the Maliwat family name, authorizing Continental's corridor to cross the 12-foot strip. In exchange, a monthly easement royalty of P4, 200, indexed to inflation every 5 years, transferable to Crispin's heirs in perpetuity, for as long as any part of the corridor operated. Folsom said, "That's every month?" "Forever." Elena said, "Yes." Folsom said, "We could build around it." Elena said, "Your engineers have told you that isn't possible. So has the ridge. So has the creek." Folsom was quiet for a long time. He said, "Fine." Elena called her father at 6:30 that evening. He picked up on the second ring. She said, "They accepted?" He said, "Good." She said, "Every term?" He said, "Good." She said, "Papa?" He said, "Thank you, Elena." He hung up. Rosario was at the stove. She had heard enough. She put the kettle on. The signing took place at the county clerk's office on April 4, 1972. Crispin signed last. He used the same pen he had used to draw the valley map in October 1950. He walked out to his truck. He sat for a moment. He opened the notebook to the final empty page. He wrote, April 4th, 1972. Settled. P4 200/month. Easement held. Corridor theirs. Terms ours. 23 years. He capped the pen. He put the notebook on the passenger seat. He drove home. 3 days later, Reginald Folsom read 4 lines about the agreement in the local paper's property column. He read it twice. He set the paper down. He said nothing to anyone. In the small town of Pinamalayan, 2 of the men who had laughed in that grain barn on September 3, 1949 were still alive. One of them saw Crispin at the market the following week and looked at his shoes. The other one crossed to a different aisle. Either of them said a word. Some men collect land. Crispin Mollywood collected the one document that made all of their land worthless without his permission. If you had been in Crispin's place, would you have taken the P2.4 million in that phone call, or held out for P4, 200 every single month, forever? That's the question he answered before he even picked up the phone. And now you know why.